Hello all. We had a good meeting with the governor and the other leaders. We've set a time to come back next week. Had good conversation. Didn't make a huge amount of progress, but had good conversation, and I think we have some questions that I think need to be answered between now and then. So we hope to get some of that information and meet again next week and hopefully make some progress.
What questions need answered?
Well, I think just about bonding and some of the things that were in the bill, so nothing, no.
Why wait a week?
Schedules, people have sticky schedules at this time of the year, so it was the time that we could find to all get together.
So the governor has said that he thinks a special session would need to happen before the end of the month. Are you on the same page there?
As far as I'm concerned, I would like to see that, but we're still a ways apart on where we stand on these outstanding issues. We like the compromise bills that were passed on the last night of session out of the House, and the governor obviously wants some additional things and has made some demands, which is certainly his right to do that. But I think we'd like him to appreciate that the bills that we passed were compromise bills. We'll see, but I think it's going to be difficult at this point to get something done before July 1st. We need to give our members some time to get back, and we're already within 2 weeks of July 1st, so it's going to be tough at this point.
Mr. Speaker, are you worried that this might lose momentum if it goes out into July with people on the campaign trail?
I've been saying since day one. That's why I came out right away on the morning after the special session and said or this morning after regular session and said let's call a special session today or tomorrow and let's get these bills passed. I think the longer it goes on, the more difficult it becomes, and the more pressure that members get from other groups to include other things. So I think as narrowly focused as we can keep it to the bills that were passed on the last night of session, the bonding bill and the tax bill, I think that'll help us get to conclusion, and the sooner we can do it, the better. The further we get from those two bills and the longer it takes, the more difficult it becomes.
He has said he's not taking anything off the table in the spirit of negotiations. I'd like to hear from the leaders. Dayton's requests for more spending, are those viable at all within your caucuses?
Well, our understanding was that the original supplemental bill that was agreed to during regular session was a part of the compromise. As I recall, the House had no additional spending in their proposal. They had maybe some resetting of priorities, but there was no additional spending. So the $280 million of supplemental to the budget we just passed last year, that was part of the give, if you will, in the process of compromise. So now we have another, spending manifesto from the governor that we have to have a whole bunch more spending. I'll tell you, they don't need our votes to pass a spending bill, but if it's part of a compromise that we all have to agree to, it's going to get tough sledding in our caucus.
Yeah, I would just say that we agreed to a lot of the governor's demands in the supplemental bill. That wasn't necessarily where our caucus wanted to go, but we agreed to it in exchange for a tax bill that we liked, and the additional spending demands are problematic. We feel that we fully funded government last year, and then we spent additional funds this year, and now there's still requests for additional funds. So it's problematic to continue to ask us to fund additional spending items. We have the budget year next year again that we can deal with those. But of course, we will continue to speak with the Democrat leaders and see what we can come up with.
The issue of Southwest Light Rail come up.
Yes, it did. It did. Actually didn't last week. It did this week. I think we're kind of at a standoff on that issue. Democrats obviously want to see that proceed. We feel that there are too many unanswered questions, and we frankly think that the money can be better invested in our road and bridge infrastructure. So, I'll remind folks that Southwest Light Rail is a project that has not had a public hearing in the legislature. The amendment that was offered on the last night of session was not offered as a bill, did not have a public hearing. These are unvetted solutions that really I think there's too many unanswered questions about to proceed with Southwest Light Rail at this point. So I don't know yet if this is a sticking point that's going to hold everything else up. I hope it's not. But at this point, there are not enough votes to pass these bills if Southwest Light Rail is included.
What are the other biggest problems besides that?
Well, that's probably the biggest at this point. You know, I think we have a concern about the size of the bonding bill and the governor's additional requests. Although, you know, I respect the governor and I respect his opinion that he wants to include some other things. Maybe there's a way to find some room within the existing bill to make some room for some of those priorities. But I'll also remind folks that the bonding bill that we passed on the last night of session was more than 50% the governor's bill. It was literally the number one priority of every one of the governor's agencies, the number two priority of most of them. So we did honor the governor's requests when we put that bill together. It's an incredibly broadly supported bipartisan bill, and I think the governor told me in this meeting that he's been hearing from folks around Minnesota that they'd like to see that bill passed. So I know that he's hearing that when he's out on the road.
After the regular session ended, there was talk about reviving a separate transportation bill. Is that talk continuing?
You know, there was a little discussion about that, but not a ton of discussion. It's probably difficult to go back and try to piece that all together. So I think what we're talking about right now is a bonding bill that would have a significant component of transportation infrastructure dollars, specifically on roads and bridges. The bill that we had on the last night of session was $700 million of road and bridge money across the state, and that's really what we're talking about.
What are your
This is the
members
longest
hearing
negotiation yet, Mr. Speaker? This is the longest you've been behind closed doors since the regular session ended?
Maybe.
I think so, those of us
I'll
counting.
take your word for it.
Was there actual negotiations? I mean, you went in very optimistic. Was that false optimism?
You know, I don't know that there was. I think it was a little more also just trying to figure out where people's soft spots are and where the sticking points were. And I think we've kind of identified those a little bit better. And there were some questions that came up, and we're going to try to find some answers to those questions. But I think, you know, we indicated that we'd be somewhat flexible, and I guess I don't know if they did, but we think that they will be. We hope that they will be, and we think Minnesota wants them to be. So we are optimistic, and we'll continue to be optimistic.
Would you be optimistic, though?
I'm just an optimistic kind of guy, Mary. So I'm going to smile and I'm going to be optimistic. So because I think that's what Minnesota wants. I mean, when we look at these bills, these weren't bills that I wrote. I mean, you look at the supplemental spending bill, the tax bill. I mean, the tax bill I think was more than 50% the Senate Democrats' bill. The spending bill was 100% their bill. The bonding bill is more than 50% the governor's bill, and the rest we split up. I mean, these are bills that I think are just good for Minnesota, and we think Minnesota wants us to work together. We think they want us to pass these bills and come to some resolution. Are there some people that want us to go a little further? I'm sure that there are, but I'm not sure that we can get to that level of agreement to fund things that are highly controversial. So we're going to do the best we can, and we're going to agree on what we can. And I think, and I'm going to continue to encourage the governor to pass what we can agree on, and I think we can get there. So I am optimistic.
No special session till July. You said you wanted 2 weeks warning. Is it fair to say don't expect special session till July now?
If we feel like we're getting close enough, which I don't think we are yet, we can kind of give members some idea or indication that there might be something that we are getting close, and there might be something on the horizon. I don't think we're there yet. So I just think in the reality of where we are with the time left before July 1st, it's unlikely that we'll have a special session by July 1st. But I'm open to it, absolutely.
So, Speaker, why has there never been a hearing on Southwest Light Rail? And then as a follow-up to that, with other projects already on the drawing board, does this mean as long as you are in control of the House, there will not be state funding for these other lines that are already on the drawing board?
Well, you know, we think that the way that we fund transit in the state of Minnesota is controversial. We think that there are controversies with Met Council. We think there's controversies with CTIB. We think there's controversies with CTIB just even amongst the members of CTIB, and certainly amongst the members of the legislature. It creates kind of turf wars within the metro area amongst our legislative members that represent those areas that you know, some want out of CTIB, some want them to stay into CTIB, and some want more funding. It really creates political complexities that make it difficult to fund these things. But also, there isn't legislative oversight on CTIB or on Met Council. And you know, the reason there hasn't been a hearing on Southwest Light Rail in the legislature is they're not coming directly asking for money from us, and that hasn't been the proposal for Southwest Light Rail. They want us to put money blindly into CTIB or into Met Council and allow them to do it without legislative approval and without legislative oversight. And that, for members of the legislature, is controversial. And we think there should be legislative oversight. We don't think that Met Council or CTIB should be able to spend $1.8 billion of capital investment money, capital money up front on this project without legislative approval. And especially considering that it binds the state to ongoing operating costs for Southwest Light Rail. So it's highly controversial, and I'm actually surprised it hasn't received a hearing. But I want to remind folks that this amendment that was attempted to be added in the Senate on the last night of session was not introduced as a bill. It was not vetted publicly. It did not have a public hearing. And we don't know what it really means and what the ramifications would be. And we haven't heard testimony from Hennepin County or the Rail Authority as to what their intentions would be if we did pass that legislation. So, there are a lot of unanswered questions, not to mention that there are still 2 outstanding lawsuits, and the project itself is pretty highly controversial. So,
Same goes to the other projects as well then, the other lines that are already...
I think in order for us to pass a long-term comprehensive transportation plan that puts additional money into transit in the state of Minnesota, we have to answer those unanswered questions about CTIB and Met Council. And it's not just us, it's members of CTIB who are concerned about how these things operate. We're I think the only metro area of the biggest ones that has the makeup where the governor appoints all the members to the Met Council. There is no legislative oversight on Met Council, and as somebody who represents the House, and I'll let Senator Hann speak for the Senate, we think there should be legislative oversight on these projects and on Met Council. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think part of the controversy over this is that for years there has not been any direct accountability or transparency on this project. You have people who are not elected to represent anybody making spending decisions about literally billions of dollars of public funds. And I think at this point, when the legislature is being asked to make an approval to do that, there should be at least an attempt to have some explanation about what's going to happen with that. What are the pluses, the minuses of this project? There's been a lot of talk by advocates, but there, as the speaker said, there are a lot of questions that have never been answered. And I think going forward, if we're going to keep doing these projects, we have to have a better process so that there is accountability to the voters who give the money when it gets spent. The process we have right now completely divorces the voters from the people who spend the money. You just can't spend billions of dollars like that and keep doing it.
I'll also say that Met Council has been sending out emails since the legislative session saying that without legislative money going in or without the approval of that amendment on the last night of session, that the project is still viable, and they are exploring other options to fund that 10% that would be required. So Met Council seems intent on proceeding with Southwest Light Rail even without the legislature. So I don't believe that actually is a sticking point to hold us up from a bonding bill. Now, I think everybody's clear that I think that legislative approval should be required before that kind of capital expenditure can happen for Southwest Light Rail, but apparently Met Council seems intent on proceeding, and I can certainly forward that email to you if you like. I think it went out to their local partners and someone forwarded it to me.
So will you folks have some type of proposal to get over this light rail roadblock? Since that, you say that's the biggest sticking point, are you going to come up with something to somehow get through this?
I think they're aware of what our position on that, and I think we're kind of waiting to hear from them if they have another idea of how to deal with it. So
the answer is no. You don't have anything in your back pocket to propose.
No, not on Southwest Light Rail.
Soccer team owners about their concerns about the tax bill and whether they can move forward?
I actually have not. I have not heard from them since session. So,
what are your members hearing from constituents about? I mean, are they clamoring for a special session and get it done or not?
I think mixed. I think folks like the bills that were passed, the tax bill and the bonding bill that had the transportation dollars in it. I think they're eager for those transportation dollars and for the other tax relief that would have been in the tax bill. We're hearing those things. I think they'd like to see those bills passed. I think. I don't want to get into the blame game. We had a good conversation upstairs, and I think we can make some progress. But from what we're hearing, we're not the ones taking the blame for the reason those 2 bills didn't get passed.
day specific for this next meeting next week?
Tuesday, 10:30. Right here.
Well, not right here.
Well, not right here. It'll be upstairs, but we will see you here next Tuesday at 10:30. So, any other questions? Thank you all. Have a great week.